Tonight, we will be learning the tools to prioritize and pay off debt, which ultimately increases your credit score. This session is partially interactive, so if you have questions during the presentation, please enter your questions into the chat, and at the end of the presentation, those questions will be addressed. Welcome to tonight's instructors. Our instructors tonight are Shimona Israel and Badil Janjua. Badil Janjua is a sales and relationship management professional who works with S&P Global's strategic buy-side clients and helps them gain access to best-in-class research solution for their day-to-day needs. And Shimona Israel currently serves as Vice President within Citi's Community Investing and Development Department. She also served as a Senior Program Officer of Local Initiative Support Corporation. Thank you so much for presenting tonight.
Our pleasure. Thank you,
Lee, for having us.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So first of all, thanks, and Shimona, if you wouldn't mind starting to share the slideshow. But we're going to be talking today about managing credit and debt. Personally, it's one of my favorite subjects just because, it's almost inevitable and it's really hard to really, function, for a lack of a better word, in this day and age without having access to credit. So let's just start maybe from slide one, and if you could, perfect, awesome. So just some housekeeping items here. So, all lines will essentially be on mute while we're speaking. However, we want this session to be interactive. So personally, I'd say if you want to raise your hand or put anything in the chat box, we will certainly be monitoring the chat. And, obviously, I would even welcome an input. If you have an input that you'd like to make on any topics, just please feel free to raise your hands and we'll love to have you speak up. And apart from that, the presentation, if there are any technical problems, obviously, please put them in the chat as well. That'd be the easiest way to handle them. And then, the presentation itself will be shared via the Office of Alumni Relations at Mercy College. So moving on to the next slide, I think Leah did us a very kind intro, but so I've been in the finance field for about 13 years actually at this point. And I mostly work with sustainable climate finance clients within the S&P, and I've been a volunteer instructor with My Money Workshop, I'd say coming up almost in 3 years. I started right when COVID hit and I was supposed to do these in person. Since then, I've been doing all of these sessions mostly virtually. So it's been a while. And then I'll just pass things on to my co-host, Shimona Israel, who'll be joining me today, controlling the slide deck, as well as sharing her valuable insights on a couple of topics. So over to you, Shimona.
Thank you, Badil. So most of my career has been spent in nonprofit management. I worked for Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation, which is the nation's first community development corporation in the United States, started by the Kennedy family. Spent time at organizations like Goodwill and LISC, and that was in the capacity of really social services and getting much needed services to people in our community. And so it was a natural transition for me to go on to Citi as the Vice President of Community Investing and Development, and I oversee markets in Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. I look forward to presenting today and talking to you about the importance of not just being fiscally responsible, but additionally being able to have good credit, which gives us access to more resources.
Great, perfect. Thanks, Shimona. Glad to partner here with you. So just a little bit of background on My Money Workshop itself. So My Money Workshop is a nonprofit organization that educates people to manage their finances wisely and to make a lifetime of informed decisions. Just as a general note, all instructors and guest speakers are volunteers. Please note that any information we provide is strictly for educational purposes only during the webinars, and it's not really intended to be or should be considered advice with respect to your personal finances, given everyone's personal financial situation might be different or unique. And last but not the least, this is a safe space. So what you share today will not be shared with others unless, we have your explicit permission to do so. Perfect. Thank you. Moving on. So our agenda for today is essentially going to be talking about how to navigate credit and debt and what are the steps you can take to effectively manage both. We will also talk a little bit about some tools and resources that can help empower you with knowledge and help you further with your financial wellness. So looking forward to the chat today. in terms of the objectives today, our goals would be essentially to provide you with knowledge and tools that will help you be smart with credit and debt in 2023. So just a general note, credit is something I think like it's inevitable, and whether you like it or not, it's like it's part of our lives. I would actually love to share some personal examples for actually even from today where having good credit were relevant. So as we talk through this, the presentation, we'll definitely share some insights there. Just before we go ahead, would love to get some input from the group and just get some thoughts. So if you can share on a scale of 1 to 10. How prepared do you feel to manage your credit and debt right now? And, please, you can just share your honest assessment. It doesn't have to be, you don't need to feel shy. So I'd love to see if anyone, we have, I think, a decent number of participants, about 23. So would love to get some comments around, 1 being like low and 10 being, you feel very confident about your preparedness when it comes to credit and debt. I'd love to see if you have any comments. Well, while we're waiting for any thoughts, one true story I'll share. I'm a recent homeowner. I just bought a house, my first home in my life for 4 months ago. And just on Monday, I was trying to get my heating equipment serviced. And the guy came in and he told me actually that my boiler, the steam boiler, is 35 years old and it's basically about to blow up. So you can no longer use the heat. And at that point, it was almost a point of panic. I'm like, oh, what do I do now? But interestingly, there's a lot of incentives available right now. And I was able to quickly find out that basically, if you have been with a utility company and you've been paying your bill on time, it even doesn't have to do anything with your credit score, but you have a credit history with your utility company. I was actually able to, it took some back and forth, but I was able to get 0% interest-free financing for 10 years. So just one practical example, just like, paying your bills on time sometimes can like have such a huge, like that was like a huge help, because otherwise, I don't know, it's a very big expense and I don't know how else I would have managed that sum. So
if anyone wants to put their answers, we've got a bunch of answers in the Q&A.
okay,
so
sure.
Feel free to put all of your information directly there. We've got a bunch of folks at the 8 level, a few at the 5.
Yeah, that's very good. Thanks. Yeah, and we have 8 and 10 now. I can now see the Q&A now. I was just monitoring the chat box, but good to know. All right, perfect. That's super helpful. Thank you for everyone who has contributed, and seeing some 8s in there and 10s and even 5 is pretty good, because like I feel like some and 7, sometimes credit can be a really overwhelming topic. So that's helpful. And please, it seems like we have a few individuals with some good experience with credit. So we would love to have your input as we go through this section today. So perfect. If we move on to the next slide, please. So before we talk about credit, we just wanted to talk in general a little bit about having a financial wellness plan, because having a plan, an overall financial plan, really helps you with a few different things beyond just credit and debt, right? It helps just on the mindset section on the far top left. Everyone has aspirations, dreams, visions, setting goals. And, essentially you cannot really achieve the stuff on the left, your dreams and vision, unless you set goals and, change your habits, right? You need to have positive habits that are going to help you achieve those dreams and vision. Similarly, budgeting and savings is a very important part of your financial wellness plan. You need to create a budget, track your spending, as well as you save regularly, because without doing those things, you're not really going to be able to financially succeed. Banking and understanding how banking works is another big element. And similarly, investing for your future, whether it's for your retirement, whether it's to pay your taxes, and in general, thinking about how you're working on your overall investment strategy, it's a very important part of your financial wellness plan. And then in the bottom left corner, we have credit and debt management, which is extremely important. Like just like from my practical example from today, like having a good credit is almost essential, from buying a home to buying a car, to getting a good rate on your student loan, to credit, everything, pretty much everything we do in our life, like your credit worthiness is a huge, important aspect of it. And then, one comment I'll make here, and we'll talk more about, is like, even if you've, made some, we all like learn from mistakes, even if, your credit score may not be that good today, there are many things you can do to easily improve your credit. I've personally helped many of my family members who didn't have as good of a credit score just because they made a few mistakes. They've been able to rectify and correct it very quickly. So nothing that can't be overcome. Perfect. Moving on to the next slide, please. We'll just talk a little bit about our financial wellness checklist. So, what are some things that we should focus on? We should have a financial vision. We should create SMART goals, create a budget, always track your expenses and spending, because if you're earning more than you're, earning less than you're spending, then you're in trouble. And then managing a budget, being a smart shopper, managing a bank account, saving regularly, and then managing your credit and debt regularly. So My Money Workshop offers several courses on some of these other topics here, but the focus for today will be credit and debt, and that's where we will spend most of our time. Perfect. Next slide, please. Great. So where do we even start with credit, right? So let's talk a little bit about it. And I think the best way to do that would be just by understanding what even credit is. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Credit essentially means receiving something of value now and promising to pay for it in full later. For example, in my case, it means, from the example from literally this week, like it means that, I'm going to get a new heating equipment, which is of tremendous value. And then I'm promising that over every month with my utility bill, I'm actually going to pay them back over 10 years. So if you don't pay the amount in full and you pay the minimum required, though I got this great deal, which anyone's eligible for, by the way, now, most of the time, if you don't pay the amount in full, there's an interest rate that applies, and, you incur those interest charges, and we'll talk a lot about interest. And then what is interest itself? It's essentially the cost of borrowing money, right? In my case, I'm getting that 0% interest rate just because the government is offering it right now. And there's some incentives that were recently released. However, in most cases, when you borrow money from someone, you pay a per annum interest rate, and it can be either simple or compounded. We'll talk a little bit more about the different type of interest rates further into the presentation. I'll now pass things to my colleague Shimona to talk a little bit more about the types of credit.
Thank you. And so with regards to the types of credit, there's installment credit, where credit that can be paid with a fixed amount in a definitive amount of time, like you buy furniture and large appliances at a retail store, and they could potentially say, well, you can have $3,000 in credit at this particular store, right? Or maybe it's Macy's and they're giving you $500 or whatever the amount is. It also includes most car loans, mortgages, and student loans. So again, you're paying a fixed amount over a definitive amount of time, which is different from revolving credit, such as a Visa, MasterCard, American Express, or Discover. No set payment plans, length, or amount, but the amount does vary each month, right, depending on how much you spend, and no need to request an additional loan each time it's used. So what I like about revolving credit is if we take cash and we purchase, let's say, a $2,000 couch or a $300 couch, depending on if you're frugal. I'm frugal, so let's say a $400 couch max, but I'm paying in cash, then I get the couch, they get the cash, and the transaction is done. But if I pay with a credit card, right, the same $400 couch, now I pay off the $400 to American Express or whomever my credit card agency is. But then when it revolves, the $400 is still sitting there. So it's not like the $400 disappeared because it just went to whatever retailer I gave it to, right? It stays within my realm of access because I can continue to use the $400 each month as long as I'm paying my bill. So that is the benefit and difference between revolving and installment.
Perfect. Thanks, Shimona. So we have a question in the chat, and that was, I think, a great overview, by the way, of the different types of credit, which is around, should you pay off your debt as quickly as possible? So it's an interesting topic, and I think the answer would be a little bit clearer as we go through the presentation, but my personal opinion would be it depends. It depends on how where you are with your financial wellness plan, how proficient you've become with investing money. That's my personal answer. It might be different. I think many people would answer and say that you can just essentially go ahead and you should pay your debt always first. But I will make the comment, right? So if right now I can go ahead and invest in if I have $10,000, I can invest them in an I bond, an inflation savings bond, and I can get a 9 or 7% interest rate. And at the same time, the government is offering me an incentive where I can get my steam boiler for 0% interest rate for 10 years. Why would I pay that first when I'm able to essentially make a 7% return on the same 10,000 that I would have paid for the boiler? So there's just that example of like, you need to kind of like see your situation. But obviously if you have credit card debt, which right now is, I've seen crazy APRs like 29, 30%. Like if you have that, like it's a no-brainer. Absolutely. There's no investment out there that guarantees a 30% return. Yes, you should always pay your debt down first. So the answer is it really depends on the type of debt. If it's a really low cost student loan, it's different. But if you have a high credit card debt, you should absolutely pay it sooner. Even a personal loan or a line of credit, if it's high interest rates, it all depends on what your personal situation is. And that's where I think like sometimes talking in more detail to someone one might be helpful. So, and yeah, happy to take more questions on this topic as we go through the presentation. What is the interest that you pay, right? So what is interest? So interest is essentially the cost of borrowing money. It could be simple or compound. So what does that mean, right? So we'll talk about this a little bit more. And Shimona was giving this example, but with that American Express example or credit card example, you have $400, right? And if you keep on not paying that bill, they will keep on hitting you with that, whatever the interest rate is, which is right now for most credit cards, it's around 28, 27, something like that. So, that amount keeps on getting compounded. As an opposite example, a car loan is more of a simple interest where essentially you start with a principal amount, whatever it is, let's just say 10,000 again for ease of reference, and you buy a car for 10,000, and then you have a fixed rate of 4% to 3%. And that's what you get charged each month, and you pay that down. So generally, compound interest is more dangerous, for a lack of a better term, than simple interest. And you always want to be more careful with that because it can really balloon very quickly. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So if you go to the next slide, please.
And just speaking about ballooning, I challenge you, remembering that it's a safe space. Have we ever spent, $100 on an item, $75 on shoes, or, the $400 on the couch? And then by the time we look at our credit card statement a few months later, it's now $800 on the same $400 couch, or the $75 hoodie is now $200, right? So it's like, what is the value? Was that a $200 hoodie? Did you need to spend that much?
Probably not. Especially if you can't pay that back, certainly not. So good point. So yeah, we talk a little bit more about, compound interest versus simple interest. As you said, it's more dangerous. It's calculated on the principal amount and any accumulated interest. So it keeps on, adding. And it can have a big negative impact on the amount of interest due on your monthly payments when the lender's not paid on time. So the suggestion would be always pay your credit card bills in full and on time. This will, really ensure that you have no or minimal compound interest. It's really hard sometimes, when you have that limit on your card to be disciplined. But I think this is like most of the people who have challenges with debt. Obviously, there's sometimes like uncontrollable circumstances. There's medical issues, there are other issues that we can't control, right? Life happens. And that's totally normal. And that's why you have these safety nets. But a lot of times it's very simple. It's just like going ahead and buying those shoes and clothes and, just sometimes like discretionary items that really end up becoming a massive amount, and then it's really hard to pay down. So I would, if as much as you can, pay it in full every month. I would say if you have difficulty with this, almost pay it every week. They allow you to pay more than once a month. So, just get your paycheck paid right away and only put money on the credit card that you have in your pocket. Don't do anything else on there.
I'm going to second to try to pay in full when you can, because we still want to be cognizant that the credit card company is a for-profit institution. And so when they tell you, well, the minimum payment you only need to make is $30 on this $70 hoodie, or it's, $10 on this, and you're like, okay, cool, I give you your $10, then that's when they start to get you with the interest, right? So many people feel like, well, I'm doing what I was being told to do, right? I paid the minimum amount and I paid it by my due date. I should be fine. Technically, you are following the rules, but it doesn't mean that it's in your best interest. The best interest is to pay in full.
Very good point, Shimona. Totally agreed. If you look at how much money these large banks make from just like interest and late fees, it's in billions. So it's definitely not in your interest. So definitely something you want to look at. Great point. So just to share, there are a few different types of credit cards, and I'm sure you've come across some of them in your personal life. So the first one is essentially prepaid. So it's, what does that mean, right? You go to a store, you buy like a Visa gift card or something, you give them $100, and essentially you've paid the money up front, right? And it's not linked to any of your personal accounts. It's just money on that account. It's like a Visa card, and then you can either use it online to shop, or you can use it like a physical card. So that's the first type, which is prepaid card. The second type is a store credit card, which essentially is usually made for a retailer. It gives you like some kind of discount. Costco has their own cards. Gap has their own cards. Usually what that does is that it offers you rewards or points at that retailer. You get a little bit more incentive than just a generic credit card. But still, something you want to be careful about, because those usually have a spending limit. It's a credit limit. So it impacts your credit history. It's based on your credit score. So you want to be careful there. A bank card is just the classic credit card that we talk about, Amex, Visa, Chase, Capital One, whatever, where a credit card is issued to you. You can use it pretty much anywhere to pay for any goods or services. And last but not the least is the secured credit card, something I personally use. So it can be great when either you've made some mistakes in the past and you had bad credit, or interestingly, personally, I am a first generation immigrant. I moved to US 7 years ago. And when I moved here, the first easiest way for me to build credit was to get the secured credit card. So a secured credit card, the way it works is that essentially you go to a bank. Bank of America is popular for them, but many banks offer it. You go to a bank. In my case, I gave them $200. It was a security deposit. And then I got a credit card, or they call it a secure credit card, for $200. So that was the max limit I could use. It was basically my own money, but it was a way for the bank to train me on how to use it and then pay it back. And as I did it for a year, after a year, they made that secured credit card into an unsecured, because I had established some credit history, because I had no credit history when I moved here. And that was a very, personally helpful tool. It's also very helpful for anyone who has a bad credit. It can help you in the future with your, with improving your credit. We just have a quick question. I want to take a look at this. I had to quickly pay off a loan I took out because I had compound interest. I had to go on underemployment at a job. Basically, they had nothing to do with my major. I bought a house and the roof was rotten. I paid it off in a year though. So I think that's a good story. And, that tells you that sometimes you have to take a loan with a compound interest. It sounds like this individual had, there was they had an unemployment issue with their job, and also they had a major repair of their house, and they didn't have an option. But obviously, if your roof is rotten, you have to fix it. You can't live in a house with a leaking roof. So, and this individual was able to pay it off in a year back. So I think that's a very, very good story of like how you use a credit card or a secured line of credit or an unsecured line of credit to your benefit. Because you had to use it, but you were responsible. You paid it back in a year. So whoever the anonymous attendee who shared that, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's exactly how you want to use credit, as an emergency when you need it. So good job there. Thank you for sharing that. Perfect. Talking a little bit more about how you want to think about a credit card on the next slide, please. It's essentially a 30-day loan. It's not free money. It's actually not money that you have in your account. So when the credit card bill arrives, you have less than 30 days to pay it, and you should make sure that you pay it back. Also, you should always keep track of the purchases and any interest you're incurring, because as you talk about interest, it's really going to compound, and you may end up paying even more than for that $100 shoe. You might end up paying $500 if you're unresponsible. So definitely something to be careful about. Awesome. So just one question here. Do you have a credit card experience you would like to share? Good or bad? You've got a great example about a personal loan, but we'd love to see if there's any credit card examples here. Even for any of our panelists, if they.
I have a story of a time that I was unemployed. I believe my income was very low, something like $6,000 or $7,000 a year. Like, people don't believe me when I tell them, because I think I wore it well. Like, you didn't know that I was that destitute, but I was. And I mean, I was literally rationing food at one point, but I had access to $50,000 in credit. And I think a big misconception is that credit is aligned with how much you earn. It has very little to do with your income. And so if you have a $300 credit card and you are responsible with your $300 credit card, your credit score will go up. Similarly, if you have a $20,000 credit limit and you're responsible with that $20,000 credit limit, your credit score will increase. And so I think the big epiphany for me was that despite, a fluctuating income, you can still maintain a good credit score and have access to credit, which at that time really became a lifeline for me. It was, unfortunate because I didn't want to incur too much debt that I would have to then repay with the interest. But, when we hit those rough spots, it was helpful to have, that anchor that I could kind of lean on, that I had this abundance of credit. And so as opposed to just spending the credit and understanding that I didn't have a large income. And so how was that going to offset that? I used that money to purchase goods, and I ended up opening a small boutique. And so every time I swiped a credit card, it was for a good that I would sell at a higher cost. Long story short, just wanted to distinguish that your income and your credit limit and your credit access does not have to correlate.
Yeah, very good point, Shimona. Life is never linear. It's never a straight line. You're going to have ups and downs. Everyone has good days and bad days, and good years and bad years. So yeah, this is a safety net. You want to cherish and nourish it for the day you need it. And then when you need it, you use it very responsibly. So I think that was very well put. And just, I know I said chat box, but it's the Q&A section. So please, feel free to send any, type anything you want in the Q&A section that's relevant. Great. Awesome. Moving on to the next slide. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on this, but it's just like a real life example of how things can get out of control. I think we've shared a few examples already, but this is the story of how a $2 coffee becomes $73. So essentially, you buy a $2 coffee and then you don't pay it. So when you don't pay that $2 bill, a month later, first they're charging you an interest expense, whatever the interest is on, $2, and then there's a $35 late fee. The next month, they're again charging you interest and there's a late fee. And just in 2 months, that $2 expense, just because you obviously, probably just didn't remember to pay that bill or whatever happened, now the credit card company wants $73 for the coffee. So the moral of the story is try to pay on time and in full always, whenever you can. Awesome. Well, I'll pass things on to Shimona again to talk a little bit about how to manage credit.
So tips to manage credit is one, we want to choose credit wisely. Be in the know, understand and manage your credit limits. Do not use all of your available credit. Example, ideally, you want to use no more than 30%. 30% utilization is the max in order to see your credit score increase, although you're utilizing credit. Know how much you owe, create a monthly budget, set up a monthly bill payment plan. Some people use their calendars. I certainly have reminders on my calendar when each credit card is due. Pay off collection debt or negotiate a payment plan, make on-time payments, and at least the minimum. But we have already spoken that you want to pay more than a minimum. Typically, and Badil might know better than I do what the exact percentage is, but I think it's only 1% of the principal amount that credit cards typically ask you to pay. And then everything else is interest. So if you're paying $400 a month, you're not touching that initial $70 hoodie, right? You're only maybe touching $2 of the hoodie, and then the other money is spent specifically on interest. And so minimum payments are really meant to keep you somewhat entrapped. And so you want to maximize by paying as much as possible. Similarly, the 30% utilization is the way to say, I am going to utilize credit, but not impact my credit score negatively. So if I want to spend $500 or something, I need to ensure that that credit card limit is at least $1,500, right? So that I know that I am not spending more than 30%. I spent my $500 on whatever item I needed, but it did not impact my credit score negatively. Also, be careful with your credit. Keep your PIN safe. Add alerts for all transactions. This is very helpful and it's free. Check your statement regularly. Something I forgot to mention on the last slide is your credit card due date is not necessarily the same day that they report you to the credit bureaus. So you want to be able to distinguish. They may say, pay your bill on the 10th of every month. And pay this minimum payment of $50. And so you're like, what? Here goes my $50 and here's the 10th of the month. However, they report you to the credit bureaus on the 4th. So if they're reporting you on the 4th, when they report you, it looks like you're past your 30% utilization, depending on what your credit limit is, because it is technically the 4th in which you want to make sure those payments are made, because that's when you're being reported. You can call your credit card company to identify what day of the month are you reporting me to the bureaus, so that you are informed when you're making decisions about when to make your payments. Back to being careful with your credit. Do not say your credit card number out loud in public areas. If you ever pay over the phone, sometimes we order things, maybe it's food. Sometimes I'll order food over the phone and they say, give me your card number. And then I hear them repeating it. I'm like, come on, please don't repeat my card. Just take it down and trust that you're putting it in correctly, right? Do not save your credit card number inside of apps or on your phone. When shopping online, make sure it's a secure site. So you should be looking for the HTTPS at the top in order to ensure that it's secure, and do not lend your card to anyone. Key takeaways to managing credit is it's essential to pay on time, keep track of how much you owe, keep track of the dates that they tell you to pay versus when you're reported, think before you spend, be mindful and careful with credit cards, do not exceed the 30% utilization. If you have exceeded your budget for the month, do not rely on your credit card to make another purchase, enact a freeze when necessary, be aware, be informed, and be wise.
Great. That's excellent sage wisdom. Really everything you should be doing when it comes to credit cards. So thanks for sharing that, Shimona. So yeah, we talked a lot about credit. So we're going to just talk a little bit about debt. Credit essentially becomes debt when once you use it and you avail it. And there are different types of debt. So it's essentially anything you owe. It can be your rent payment or mortgage payment, your student loans, the credit card payments themselves, medical bills. And, all of these above are most of 99.9% of the time, they're tied to your credit score and your credit rating, for lack of a better word. So, you want to be careful with these payments because lack of payment of any of them can impact your overall credit history and can impact your future ability to get credit. Awesome. So where do we even start, right? There's, and this is really for a case where you've already accumulated debt. So what do you do, right? And there's some different strategies depending on your personality and, your personal circumstances, I should say, sorry. And it could be either, rebalancing your spending, obviously always trying not to spend more than you earn, sharply reduce spending in cases where you are spending excessively and outside of your means. Sometimes, you can look at side hustle where you can have other ways to boost your income if your income is less than your spending. And then, you always want to plan for things. There's not a scenario where I think you don't have a plan, because without a financial wellness plan, you're going to just snowball and deteriorate the situation. So moving on. It's one of the ways you start is always by starting to see what kind of debts you're carrying. And, the individual interest rates and loans. So installment credit and loans, there's scenarios in which credit can be paid with a fixed amount and a definitive amount of time. This is usually your car loans, mortgages, student loans, or other major purchases. So these are the ones usually, I'd say they're all important, but they don't have as much of a compound interest situation. And then there's a revolving credit, which is your credit cards, such as Visa, Master, Amex, and Discover. And they typically do not have a fixed payment plan. It's just really, as Shimona was pointing out, you can pay as less as 1% of the total principal, and then you could basically pay it for the rest of your life, or you could try to pay more. And then, this is where it's due each month. And this is where, it's super important to kind of whenever I've worked personally with my own, I've worked with myself, helped myself, or with others who had credit issues. And I've had a few of these conversations. The first place where you start when you have debt and you have a credit problem is you prioritize your debt. You look at the debt, which is the highest interest rate, because that's the one you definitely want to pay first, because that's where you're accumulating more and more interest. You're giving more money to the bank or the institution. And then, obviously you want to pay everything, but you definitely want to start there. So it's always good to take an inventory and knowing which one you need to pay first, depending on the interest rate and the terms. Awesome. Moving on. So, this is one of the hot buttons for graduating college students, which is navigating student loans. So just an interesting fact, that approximately 75% of recent US college grads have a $30,000 loan just as they're entering the workforce. So, and depending on your loan payment schedule, the originations process, a sample repayment could be about $200 per month for the next 10 to 20 years of your life. So, just something to be aware of. I'm personally a student right now as well. I'm currently getting my MBA from Rutgers, so aware of these challenges. So just, there are some resources available, and one great resource is studentaid.gov, which gives you a lot of guidance around FAFSA forms, loans and grants, helps you with loan repayments, as well as, loan forgiveness updates. So just something to be aware of. It's a good tool, just like everything else available. You sometimes need to use it, and you need it to graduate, but just knowing your options and being a smart consumer really goes a long way. Okay. So talking about a plan to work down your debt, as we've talked a little bit about this, borrowing is not always necessarily bad. It is a tool that you can use to your advantage. It's often, a lot of times, sometimes, money doesn't grow on trees. It's sometimes the only way to pay for costly things like an education, a car, or a home. And, it also helps you establish credit. So, we live in this world, which is a credit-based world. So you need to have credit because you're likely going to need it at some point. You never know when your heating stops and you need that credit. So something to always, cherish and nourish. However, while it is like anything, in excess is bad, like if you mismanage it and use it too much, you can really overwhelm your budget, and you can have that compound interest problem, especially if you're borrowing right now. The interest rates are super high. The credit card interest rates are, as I said, like around, in some cases, touching 30s. And I think I even read somewhere that you could, depending on your credit score, it could go as much as 40. It's like really, really, really high. So you really want to stay current on your interest payments. Otherwise, this will really just destroy your credit, and it will snowball and it will get out of control. And then obviously, if you don't manage your credit well, your future chances of borrowing are basically reduced significantly. We have one comment in the chat or Q&A section, which is around the interest rates right now are high on all credit card debt. A couple of my accounts were low since October. Now they're up to 28%. So my balance is just because of the interest rate. So this is just, an example, which I completely agree with. These are revolving credit lines. They don't have a fixed interest rate. So as, the commenter put in there, you need to be very careful. Even though when you bought a credit card and you got the form in the mail saying, oh, your interest rate is 10%, given interest rates are rising, the rate on your personal line of credit card is also increasing. So even though you might have a plan already, it's a very good point that you might want to reevaluate your plan if you were paying down a debt, and because it may not be the same. In this case, the rate went up to 28%. And I think if interest rates rise further, it's even going to go up further. So thank you for that input. There's a good question and I'm curious if there's, is there a cap on how much interest a credit card can charge? I personally do not know the answer to that off the top of my head. I know it's touching 40 in some cases. Shimona, not anyone else. Does anyone know if there's a cap on interest rates?
I hope so.
That's my hopeful answer as well. But yeah, we can look into that and definitely follow up. Thanks for that question. Very, very good one. Because I guess where do you stop? It's a fair question. Is it 40, 50? It can be 100%.
Anything over 20%, I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's already over 20. So yeah, who knows? So
yeah, it's just like too much.
I hear you. Awesome. And, just talking a little bit about debt. Debt in general can derail your financial wellness. Getting out of debt sooner will obviously help your personal life, your mental sanity. And, it starts by understanding what kind of debt you have and how much you owe. You start with just writing down all your expenses, the interest rates as we're talking about it, and then, understanding why you're in debt, right? Sometimes it's personal circumstances that are inevitable, but sometimes it could be just like that overspending, right? You just want the next Nike sneakers or whatever it is. And, that can really balloon. So you just want to be careful with what is the reason for your debt and manage it appropriately. Passing things on to Shimona.
And so tips to manage debt. You want to know how much you owe, create a monthly budget, set up a monthly bill payment plan, pay off collection debt or negotiate a payment plan, make on-time payments and at least the minimum. And I do want to touch on something that Badil mentioned a few seconds ago, which was really about the mental aspect that's associated with carrying debt. There can be anxiety, there's angst, there's fear. People may experience depression. 40% of Americans experience some type of depression, and many times it is tethered to their financial health. And your mental health is also tethered to your physical health, right? Your heart rate can increase. You are not sleeping well at night. Your gut is churning. And so although we're talking about this very separate entity of our finances, it's so closely tethered to our emotional and physical well-being. And so some key takeaways are managing your debt. Managing your debt comes down to managing your budget. You always want to save for emergencies. There are studies that suggest that the average American household does not have $400 in savings. And then when an emergency does happen, they typically pull from their essential needs, whether it's your rent or some other essential resource they pull from in order to pay for the emergency. And that's why saving for emergencies is extremely important. Be disciplined. Keep your wants in check. So, I identify what is a want versus a need and then prioritize that. And you need to be consistent with your payments. It may take a while to pay down your debt, but seeing your debt decrease will make you want to reach your goals faster. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Sorry, I was multitasking. I actually found the answer for Patricia for credit
is
limit.
Is it 29.99?
Unfortunately, there's no federal law that limits the interest rate that you can be charged. There are some protected classes and some state rules, and I'm going to post this link in the Q&A and I was about to type that for the audience, but there are some cases where, if you're a veteran or if you work in the armed services, there's a limit to how much interest you can be charged, but in general, there's no federal law limiting it. So yes, you could in theory be paying 60%. So
wow.
That's a scary fact, and all the more reason to be careful and manage your credit. So can't rely on hope. So moving on to credit score. So essentially, everything we've been talking about, right? Credit, debt, how do you quantify this? Essentially by this credit score, right? And so essentially your credit history can affect your access to credit loans, housing, insurance, and other important services. And it's all determined by what your credit score is. So maintaining and managing credit scores is a very important part. So what are ways you can protect your credit score? Do not apply for too much new credit at one time. So there's, and there's some great apps for this. We can talk about some research at the end, but, that help you navigate these things. But essentially, if you open too many credit card accounts, generally it's not looked at positively. It means that you're trying to get too much credit too quickly. We've talked about this. You never want to exceed 30% of your available total credit. Always have a payment plan for all debt and upcoming expenditures. Always pay your bills on time. Monitor your credit report. There are many great secure apps that you can use that are free, at least financially. They do send you ads and stuff, but that you can use to monitor your credit on a weekly basis. Always look carefully at your statements and dispute and correct any errors that you might have. And if you have older accounts, definitely try to keep them on, because having older accounts increases your total credit history age, and it helps you boost your overall credit score. And then pay your taxes and child support if applicable, and all obligations on time, and always be aware of scams, right? As you were talking about, don't give your PIN, don't give a social security number out loud, because that's how people can steal your identity and get debt on your behalf, and then you're left having to pay it back.
And then just to piggyback on that 30% utilization one more time, just envision yourself having $1 and lending it to a sister or brother or friend. And so you give them this $1 and they pay you back a penny a month. And 3 months later, they've only paid you back 3 cents. And they're like, can I have another $1? Would you be inclined? Versus if you gave someone $1 and they paid you back a quarter a month, and then 3 months later, you've already gotten back 75 cents and they're like, hey, I need another $1. Who would you feel more comfortable lending to? So I think the credit card companies think in a very similar fashion.
Definitely. So it's Q&A time. Any questions for us? We've covered obviously a lot. And, so there's been some great input from the audience, which is really appreciated. I learned something new just by the questions, but yeah, if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, 60%, 70%. I didn't know that was possible. It was very predatory, right?
And there's like another comment from the same member, which is around, one of the challenges they have is that, they have a college kid who they've added as an additional member to their card for emergencies. And, sometimes emergencies for a 19-year-old are not the same as what, it's sometimes like ordering food for a whole gang who's watching a football game. So it has been, and that credit card has been disabled, but, obviously there's still that bill to pay. So yeah, no, I think that is a challenging situation because you are personally stuck with it. I think one thing I'm planning to do, I do have a daughter who's not that old yet, but one suggestion I have, and I don't know if in your case you did it, but there's a way to put a spending limit. Like you can put very easily all these apps, you can go in and for each of your additional card household members, you can limit it to like $100 or $200 or whatever it is. And I think, I'm not sure, but you might even be able to limit the type of charge, like how much can they charge in one charge, so there's like a lot of those options that I think are really helpful. And obviously, more than that, having limitations, you want to continue having that conversation with your, with others in your family around how to manage debt better, because in the future they will have their own social security number and they can go and get a credit card and get
I have a 19-year-old son who's at Howard University. I made him an authorized user on my American Express card, and I too noticed some outlandish purchases. Did the same exact thing that Badil just said. He has a credit limit now of $200 a month. That's $50 a week. For some reason, he keeps going out to eat when clearly there's food in his cafeteria. So I get it. But I would say you want to manage how much they can spend, and you can also monitor in real time right through the app. I see my account, but I also see his and the purchases that he's making.
We're quickly talk to a few resources because we do have some more questions that I think we try to touch because we still have 9 minutes. But moving on to the next slide here, we just want to talk to some additional resources, and you will get this deck so you can look at them later. But one good tool is this hyperlink here for bankrate.com for calculators, which is the minimum payment calculator. So this is like just a visual of like how it gives you an idea of like, okay, you put in your current interest rate, which I doubt anyone has 17% right now. I don't. And, so it tells you like what your interest rate is, what your balance is, and depending on how's your minimum payment calculated and what you're paying and how long it will take you and what's total interest. So this can be a good tool to just see like, and make a plan that how quickly you want to pay the debt, right? We had that question around prioritizing which debt to pay first. You want to use tools like this to prioritize which debt is the most aggressive in terms of interest rate and which one you should pay first. I do see 2 hands raised in the chat section. Just in terms of like, I don't know how to unmute these individuals, but if you want to type in your question in the Q&A, and I'll defer to the Mercy College admin if there's a way to let people who've raised their hands unmute themselves. So just some other tips: be aware of all interest rates and penalties that may be charged on a credit card. Watch for interest rates. Don't get a credit card until you have discipline in place to be financially responsible. I think we've talked through a few of these, so maybe we can just move on to the next slide, please. Just some helpful tips. Again, I think we can just would suggest that you can go through these afterwards. And then we have a debt payment worksheet here, which I think could be a good tool. Just like, again, this is a tool you can use offline. We'll share the slide deck with you, where this is how you prioritize your debt, right? You look at the type, you look at how much you owe, you look at the interest rate APR, what's the current minimum payment, and what you have paid so far. So definitely something, if you have debt right now, to just do on your own and prioritize what you need to pay first, depending on your monthly budget. Awesome. And there's a question, can you please repeat where I can find the calculator to pay off the credit card? Yes, so you will get this slide deck later. On slide 35, there's going to be a hyperlink to bankrate.com and the calculator, so you should be able to look that up and put in your personal information. Just check it out. It's anonymous, obviously. And then, yeah, we've talked about this, but debt can really snowball. Small mistakes, the $2 coffee becomes $73. So just something you want to be careful with. And perfect. So this is an important one, how to deal with debt collectors, right? There's some laws, even though you owe someone money, it is usually called unsecured debt. So it's not like they can just harass you. So there are laws. So it's always good to be an informed consumer. If you receive a call from a debt collector, always call the creditor first and negotiate a payment plan, because debt collectors at times are charging a fee for the service and the creditor is paying them. So if you are going to pay back, and you should pay back, it's usually cheaper to just work with a creditor yourself. Also, debt collectors are prohibited to call you too early or too late at night. So, if they are calling you at unusual times or when you're at work, you can always push back. And then obviously, if you have an attorney, the debt collector generally should not contact you directly and work with the attorney themselves. And there are obviously, I used actually consumerfinance.gov earlier when we had that credit card interest rate question. So it's a great resource. And then we've also included a link in the deck around, what are the laws for debt collections. If you have that kind of scenario, definitely a very helpful link that we'd recommend that you check out. Perfect. Oh, just another resource, which is, around student loans. So as you might be aware, currently there is an extension on payment suspension for federal student loans, which is valid till June 30th, 2023. And if the relief program, is not implemented by June, then, payments will resume 60 days after this date. So, this is a benefit available to everyone right now. You don't have to pay your student loans until that date. And then there's just some general tips that we want to recommend, which is always sign up for auto pay, so you never miss a payment. Always try to make more than the minimum payment if you can. And if your loans are deferred, it doesn't mean that you just use that money to do whatever you want. Ideally, it's a good disciplined move to put that money in a savings account so you can use that to still pay down your principal, because you do have to pay it sooner or later. And then, you can use the student loan interest deduction on your taxes. So that's something you want to do. And then if you have multiple loans and you can't pay, there are ways to sometimes refinance your student loans. So you can always check with your lender. And there's another resource, a New York resource, dfs.ny.gov, that can also help with some of your questions.
Okay. And so assistance paying bills. So there's a one-shot deal through the Human Resources Administration. It's an emergency assistance program that helps people who can't pay or meet expenses due to an unexpected situation or event. Emergency assistance is provided for, but not limited to, homelessness, eviction, utility disconnection, fire, disaster, domestic violence, and to my knowledge, sometimes if you're moving and you just need furniture for your new place, a moving expense, you can also request that through the one-shot deal with the Human Resource Administration. And you will see the accessnyc.gov access HRA located at the bottom of the deck of the slide. The ERAP program. So this is assistance paying any back rent you may owe. And so the emergency rental assistance program was created to assist households that are unable to pay rent and or utilities due to COVID-19. You must meet the criteria. It's located on the page. It's pretty comprehensive, but also know that many of our local nonprofit agencies do have similar programs. If it's not a fund specifically for supporting people who are experiencing financial hardship, they can also literally support you with applying for emergency rental assistance. And so because I oversee the markets of Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island, I'm familiar. I can say just off the top of my head, Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation, if you Google it, will help you apply for emergency rental assistance program. There's an organization called Black Veterans for Social Justice. There's Chaya in Queens. And at the bottom of this slide, there's also a list. It takes you straight to the application, but sometimes it's hard to navigate these applications. You're not sure if you're putting in the right information or not. So in the event you want someone who's qualified to kind of walk you through the steps, feel free to go to one of your local nonprofits and they will be able to support you in this process.
Perfect. And thanks, Simona. So yeah, just, there's some research on how you can stay in touch with us, but just in the spirit of time, we just have 1 minute left. So I just want to quickly answer 2 questions in chat. Is there any success with getting interest rates reduced? It really depends on the type of debt. Usually I'd say it's unlikely, but depending on your circumstance and the type of loan, you might be able to get some reduction depending on what the state laws might be. And then the other comment I just want to make, the question was on student loans, you can make payments. Should you continue making payments? Yes, you should. again, it depends on like if you have a more higher paying interest debt, maybe credit card debt, you obviously want to pay that sooner. But it just depends on prioritizing that debt. Perfect. Thank you.
And please follow at My Money Workshop. That is very important. We want to continue to spread the word. We want to increase our following. We want to ensure that you're interactive with us on social media. So here's an opportunity. We're challenging everyone to pull out their phones and add at My Money Workshop right now as we speak. It's a call to action. Alexis?
Yeah, so thank you so very much. We greatly appreciate your time this evening. We will be getting this presentation out to everybody probably next week. But if you have any questions, reach out to alumni@mercy.edu and we will certainly help you out.
And follow Shimona Israel and Badil on LinkedIn. We would love to connect with you all.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.